Hi, I'm Kerrie Penney, and on this episode of Secret Heart Broadcasting, Palma Cafella. She is a perfumer, a storyteller, a florist, a magician, a beautiful soul. And if you are looking for evidence of magic in this world or need a little lift to your own spirit, this episode is for you. Hello and welcome to Secret Heart Broadcasting. I am so excited because my guest today is perfumer, florist, and creator of beauty in the world, Palma Cafella. I hope I'm saying Cafella correctly, Palma. Ours is a story of like meeting like, I think. And from the moment I met her, certainly I liked Palma. She sizzles with creativity, and not in a way that makes you feel smaller or less than, but in a way that lifts you up and makes you think, oh, I wonder what's possible. She is the kind of person I would have loved to have had as a friend when I was younger, because I'm sure we would have discovered much magic in the world. But I'm grateful to have discovered her as a friend when I'm older, which I did several years ago. I wandered into her beautiful shop in Victoria, BC, Canada, and I was met with this curtain of scent and beauty and flowers. And today I hope that we'll talk about the importance of all five senses, including the sense of smell. Palma has studied perfumery, and I'm sure we'll have lots to say about scent. But first, let me say, Palma, what a pleasure it is to welcome you to the virtual Secret Heart Broadcasting Studio. And I'm so glad we are finally able to have a conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kerrie. I'm so delighted to be here this morning as well. It's I've been so looking forward to this, our chat.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was strange because I really just wandered off the street. Palma has a beautiful shop too now in Victoria called Zingaro, and there was just this magical sense outside. And as I wandered in, as I said in the intro, there's flowers and beauty and perfume and little accoutrement. These earrings I'm wearing today, I bought at Zingaro. So just magical, wonderful little things, very nature-based, and highly unusual. It was like, what is this magic that I have stumbled upon? I know you're from Ireland, so of course I want to talk about perfuming and the shop and how you got here, but maybe we can kind of dial back a bit. I know you were born in Ireland, and I know somehow you ended up in Victoria, BC, Canada. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about how you grew up in Ireland and just maybe looking back, was it a magical kind of place? I think there's definitely a magic to Ireland.
There definitely is. I had, growing up in Ireland, for me, it was very, I came from a background of an Italian father and an Irish mother. So it was very crossed. And in those days in Ireland, like anyone outside Ireland was almost odd, right? Because we didn't get very many visitors, back then. Now it's totally different. So, my sister and I would have definitely been more unusual in school, say, because going to school, you would have to learn the Irish language. And, I went to school with the nuns. And your roll call every morning would be like, in your Irish name, but they never had a name for me or my sister, right? So it was kind of everyone else would be like Siobhan Ní Murracu Sanam Dum, whereas mine would be Palma Cafella, because there was no changing of it. So it was kind of always, that was one thing I always remember growing up in Ireland, that it was just very, we were a little bit different, right? But I always loved that, My mother was definitely, I would say, totally eccentric, which also was very wonderful. She adored her garden. And that's where my love affair of the garden started, because she came from a big family. My father, very old school Italian, where the women were, the princesses in the home. Like, he wouldn't let my mother do anything that was non-feminine. You can't take the bins out or do anything like that. His three girls in the house was the way he treated us. And he definitely did. Whereas my mother would just spend her days in the garden. And where we lived on the grounds of this really old church. And it was very wonderful because we had the church was actually on our property, so to speak. So you had that old church as a background, and then my mother's garden, right? And she wouldn't let us. She was very protective of my sister and I, and we weren't ever like allowed. We didn't really have friends coming after school. She'd always pick us up, and she used to always say to my sister and I, "You don't need anyone. You've got your sister." And it was kind of, I don't know whether it was a hindrance later on in years, which it definitely, I'd say it was. But my days as a child would be spent after school out in the garden with my dog, Dino. And that's how we spent our days. So I, being the inquisitive child, would be turning stones, looking for little animals and insects and all of these things in the garden. I and my sister can verify this, would be pulling the roses and putting them in jars and mixing with water and talcum powder to see what essence I could make. I don't know what I was doing, but there was obviously something there at that stage. And that's kind of, I spent my days in that garden and I loved it. I would, catch bumblebees and try and see would they do stuff for me and different things. It was magical for me. It was always magical. And then my grandmother's garden, she was the culinary Italian, and her garden was all herbs that she couldn't, when she moved to Ireland, you couldn't get them in Ireland. So she had to grow them. She'd bring the seeds back from Italy and grow all her herbs that she'd need, like basil and flat leaf parsley and artichokes and all the things that the Italians cooked with, right? So her garden was filled with that. And her garden to me was aromatic, edible. So that was the two. And that was my childhood pretty much until I hit my teenage years, and then, different things happened. But yeah, that was pretty much my childhood.
I had you almost described like a scene in a painting. I'm almost smelling the like fennel even. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
anise something. Yeah. So you had this deep appreciation of nature and beauty and scent even as a young child.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
did you ever spend time in Italy, or were you always in Ireland?
No, Italy was the summers. So we would spend our days in Ireland because we were at school. And then once school was done, we would go to Italy for the summers. And then my sister and I, imagine this, we hated it because we were brought to where my father's village was, which was a tiny little village off the Amalfi Coast. And all my sister and I would see was old ladies dressed in black, right? And we'd have to spend our summers there with all the old people. And we were so unhappy, but now it's the most magical place in the world. And my father ended his days back in his old village, and he has but he still has the house there, but he passed a little bit ago. So, yeah, it was very, we had very mixed cultures. Like it was definitely, half our life was Irish, half our life was Italian. And my mother definitely gravitated more towards the Italian lifestyle as well, because she loved style and fashion and was intrigued by all of that. So she used to love to go to Italy and leave us probably in the little village and take a trip to Rome and do her shopping or whatever, right?
Oh, so you had style too. Well, of course you did, because that makes complete sense. So you're having this growing up and kind of fitting in, not fitting in, but finding this nature place. What happens when you're a teenager? And I, was the mother of a teenage daughter, and I can attest to the lived experience of, for me as the mother, it went from magical fairies and wonder to like, oh, Lord, give me the strength.
Yeah, well, what happened with me, my mother was very strict, and expression was not a thing that you used, right? You would you almost suppressed because you did as you were told, and that was it, and there was no questions asked, right? And that's the way we were. I hated school, Kerrie. I was like I thought out of school I'd never get it. I would be daydreaming all day long looking out the window, and I was terrible in school, like so much so that I spent my first few years in school terrified. um, and I never learned. I copied off the girl who sat beside me, and they found it out like about 4 years later because I was so quiet. they never knew. And then I was sent to this wonderful nun called Sister Cecilia. She saved me. She took me out of that class, and it was always a stigma to have to go to Sister Cecilia because it meant that you were like, back in those days, the word dunce was used, and that's what it was, right? And it was whatever. And I remember going to Sister Cecilia's. She took me by the hand, and I was in tears. And she brought me into her little schoolroom, and there was just one desk and her desk, and that was it. And I just fell in love with this nun. She just taught me so much. She brought me how to spell and learn in a different way. And she took so much time, and she efforted with me. And every morning I used to get so excited to go to school to get her desk set up for her and, get it all ready, and I'd be waiting at the desk for her to come. And she must have been, to me, she seemed like a giant, but she was a very tall, big nun, and she was old, and I'd hear her hobbling up the corridor, the marbled floor, the old school floors, and she'd come in, and there she'd be. And that went on for a few years, 2 years. And I remember crying going into Sister Cecilia, and I remember crying leaving her and having to go back to the classroom. But the first week I went back to the classroom, I got 10 out of 10 of my spellings. And like, my mother was so ecstatic. And I just remember, and I'll never forget what she did for me, that. But what she did for me was she helped my spirit, right? Because I was scared. I didn't like being there. I felt afraid to put my hand up and different things like that. So she helped my spirit. And what she kind of taught me was, it's okay to be me, and there's other ways to get through this, navigate through this life. And because I never thought I was ever going to be able to spell or write or do any of those things, and being left-handed in a nun school as well was something that you were punished for back then. It was like, because you're writing, you'd be doing calligraphy, and like, you try to do fountain penning with like left hand, and, different things like that. But she actually just taught me it was okay to be me. And I held that, right? And, I didn't tell anyone else that, but I kind of held it in. So my spirit was like alive again inwardly, right? And, and then I got through my teenage years and kind of left the flowers and found probably boys and, things as you do when you're a teenager, right? And then at 17, I was like, okay, I'm out of here. And I left school, and I got the boat to England, and my first job was in a beautiful flower store in London, and as a trainee floral designer. And that's kind of when I got back into the flowers as a young girl.
Oh, I just am having a moment about Sister Cecilia. God bless her. It's so important to have people who can, especially with creative children, to just see them. Oh, I love that. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please tell your friends.